Okay, so we've looked at reading and writing whole numbers. And so now we're going to get into the nitty-gritty of this module, which is going to be operations with whole numbers. We're going to start with addition. This comes from section 1.2 of your textbook. So before we get into the actual addition, let's go ahead and review some notation, vocabulary, and properties. So our notation for addition is we have the plus sign. A plus B equals C. That's going to be our basic notation for addition. Now, some key vocabulary terms that we have addend. These are the numbers that are being added in a problem. So in our above example, A and B would be called the addends. The sum is the result of adding two or more numbers. So in our example above, C would be the sum. We also want some alternative words and phrases. So plus, added to, and more than. If you see these in application problems or word problems, that means that we are talking about addition. Now we do want to talk about properties of addition. The first one we have is called the commutative property. And this is really important. What it means is order doesn't matter when adding two numbers. So for instance, A plus B is the same thing as B plus A. If you were a finger counter, I sincerely hope that you use the commutative property. If I add you to add 2 plus 75, I really hope that you don't start at 2 and then add 75 on your fingers. It's easier to start at 75 and then add 76, 77. The other one we have is the associative property. And so the associative property says that grouping doesn't matter when adding two or more numbers. So if we want A plus B plus C, what we can do is we can add A plus B first and then add C onto it. Or we can add B plus C and then add A onto that. So the important thing is with addition, order doesn't matter, grouping doesn't matter. Do it however it is easiest for you. The last property we have is called the addition property of 0. If you add 0 onto any number, the result is that number. You don't need to know this right now, but in future math classes, we refer to 0 as the additive identity. All right, so there's our basic information. So now let's go ahead and get into some actual problems involving addition. So when it comes to addition, there's two different categories that we're going to look at. We have adding numbers without regrouping or carrying. This will be our first category. So our procedure in order to do this, the first thing we want to do is line up similar columns vertically. With our whole numbers, what we're going to do is push the numbers as far to the right as possible. You want to make sure that your ones columns are lined up, your tens columns are lined up, your hundreds columns are lined up, etc., etc. Then from there, starting on the right, we want to add straight down. Now, when it comes to numbers without regrouping, technically it doesn't matter where you start, but when we get into quizzes and tests and homework, are you going to be able to recognize whether it's a problem with regrouping or without regrouping if it doesn't specifically say it? So let's just go ahead and be consistent in the way that we do this. We want to start on the right and move to the left. Okay, so let's look at some examples. Example A, we have 26 plus 73. So I want to go ahead and write this vertically. As both of these numbers have the same number of digits, it doesn't matter how I write it. So if you want, you can write 26 plus 73, or you can do 73 plus 26. From there, starting on the right, we're going to go ahead and add straight down. So we get 6 plus 3 is 9, and 2 plus 7 is 9. All right, that takes care of that one. All right, let's look at another example. Let's look at B. B, again, I'm going to go ahead and line these up vertically. I'm going to put 42,305 on top and 11,563 on the bottom. Again, it does not matter which one we put on top or bottom on this one. Okay, so starting on the right, we add 5 plus 3 is 8. 0 plus 6 is 6. 3 plus 5 is 8. 2 plus 1 is 3. And 4 plus 1 is 5. So our final answer is 53,868. Okay, let's go ahead and try a couple more. Example C, we have 212 plus 35. Now if you notice here, our numbers do not have the same number of digits, so this is where we do need to be careful when we line up our numbers. I'm going to put 212 on top. Me personally, I always like my larger number, my number with the most digits, to be on top. And then I'm going to put 35 on the bottom. And I want to push it to the right as far as possible so that my columns are lined up. My ones columns need to be lined up, my tens columns need to be lined up, etc. Okay, so we go ahead and add. 2 plus 5 is 7. 1 plus 3 is 4. And then we get a 2. Okay, that takes care of example C. We get 247 as our final answer. All right, let's come to example D. This one we have 4 numbers that we're adding together. And so again, we want to go ahead and figure out how we want to put these in our addition problem. Again, it does not matter how you organize this. And as I said, my personal preference is I always like putting my numbers with the most digits on the top. Now, as you get larger numbers and more numbers, I recommend writing larger, writing more spaced out, so that you can actually see your columns. If you scrunch the numbers together, it can be really hard to figure out which numbers need to be added with the other ones. So for instance, you notice that on this one, I kind of tried to space out my numbers a little bit more. I tried to line up my columns a little bit more accurately. And if you struggle with that, you might want to turn your paper sideways and use the lines on your paper to denote your columns. Okay, so we go ahead and we start by adding straight down. Starting on the right, we get 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 3 is 8. Moving to the left, we get 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 2 is 8, plus 1 is 9. And finally, 5 plus 1 is 6. So our final answer is 698. Okay, so that takes care of adding numbers without regrouping or carrying. Okay, so let's get into some tougher problems. The next ones that we want to look at is adding numbers that do require regrouping or carrying. So just like on the previous examples, we still want to line up our columns, our similar columns vertically. We are going to add straight down, and for these problems, you do have to start on the right and move to the left. The main difference is if the sum is 10 or more, we are going to carry the left digit to the next column. We're going to put the right digit in our answer. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at some examples. Example A, we have 47 plus 29. So I'm going to line up vertically. We get 47 plus 29. Starting on the right, I have 7 plus 9 is 16. So my 6, I'm going to bring down to the bottom. My 1, I want to carry to the next column. We're going to add that 1 with the other digits. So we get 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 2 is 7. So our final answer is 76. All right, let's look at B. Just try another one that's basic. We get 58 plus 33. Starting on the right, we get 8 plus 3 is 11. So my right digit, which is a 1, I'm going to put in my answer. My left digit, which was a 1, I'm going to go ahead and carry it to the next column. If we add up these digits, we get 1 plus 5 is 6, plus 3 is 9. So my final answer is 91. All right, so that takes care of our basics. So now let's go ahead and look at some more challenging problems. Example C. We've got 4 numbers here being added together. Again, I'm going to go ahead and put my larger numbers on top and work my way down to the bottom. The other thing I want to do is I want to kind of space this out so that I can see exactly how my columns are lined up. So we have 8, 9, 7, 6, and 4, 2, 7, 1 each have 4 digits. I'm going to put those on the top. And then my 3-digit numbers, I'm going to put below that. All right, so this is what we're looking at. Okay, so now when we do this, one of the things you can do is remember that you can add these in any order, and that goes not just for how we arrange them, but also when we get into these larger numbers, try to make your additions easy. So for instance, I see 6, 2, and 2 give me 10, plus 1 gives me 11. Going on to the next column, I have 7 and 7 gives me 14, plus 6 gives me 20, 27, 28. So I'm going to put my 8 on the bottom. I'm going to carry my 1. Same thing on this column. I want to make my additions easy. I have 1 and 9 is 10, plus 2 is 12, plus 3 is 15, plus 1 is 16. And finally, 8 plus 4 is 12, plus 1 is 13. Now for that last one, do I need to carry the 1 to the next column? The answer is no. When you get to the leftmost column, you don't have to necessarily carry. So this is our final answer. We get 13,681. All right, last example. Let's look at example D. So again, I want to go from smallest to largest. So I'm going to do 7,855. Again, I'm going to spread out my number a little bit, just to make sure that we don't lose any numbers in our problem. Let's go ahead and check them off as we go along. Next one we have is 324, 86, 23, and 7. We should have a total of 5 numbers in our addition. Okay, so same thing. I want to kind of add easy numbers together. I have 4 and 6 give me 10. 3 and 7 also give me 10. That adds up to 20. Plus 5 is 25. So I'm going to bring down the 5 and carry the 2. All right, same thing on the next column. I have 8 and 2 add to 10. 2 and 5 add to 7, and 2 add to 9. So we have a total of 19. Next column, we have 8 and 3 add to 11, plus 1 gives me 12. And finally, 1 plus 7 is 8. So my final answer is 8,295. All right, so that's basically our procedure for adding numbers with regrouping or carrying. Last thing we want to look at is some application problems. So you will see some word problems throughout, and the main thing to keep in mind is when you're in this section, you can assume it's an addition problem. We also want to talk about why it's going to be an addition problem, so that when they get mixed together, it's a little bit easier to recognize. So let's look at example A. A ballpark vendor sold 185 hot dogs and 129 drinks. We want to know what was the total number of items sold. So what is the word or phrase that tells us this is an addition problem? Well, in general, when you see phrases like total, that's usually going to be, that is a word that can mean addition, if that's what you're looking for. If you were given the total, then it's not. But if you are looking for the total, it is. So this is an addition problem. So let's go ahead and add these two numbers together. So we have 185 plus 129. If we go ahead and add starting on the right, we get 5 plus 9 is 14. 8 plus 2 is 10, plus 1 is 11. And 1 plus 1 plus 1 is 3. Now, one of the things that you should get in the habit of is when working on word problems, make sure you include the correct units. Units is feet, dollars, apples, oranges. What kind of things are we talking about? And so since this said what was the total number of items sold, I'm going to put my items next to my answer. All right, next problem. An application of addition is perimeter. So perimeter is defined as the distance around a figure. Now later this semester we're going to get into geometry and we're going to talk about formulas for perimeter. But for now we're going to go ahead and just use our basic definition. Perimeter, to find it, all you have to do is add all of the sides together. So we want to add up all the sides. We have 2 15/16. So I'm going to go ahead and put those first. And we also have 2 385s. We line up our columns and we add. So let's see what we got here. Starting on the right, I have 6 and 6 is 12. 5 and 5 is 10. And if I add those together, I get 22. Same thing for the next column. If I add, I get 2 and 8 is 10. 8 and 1 is also 10. And so when we add those together, we get 20. Next column, if I go ahead and add, I get 5 and 5 is 10. 3, 3, and 2 is 8. So when I add those together, I get 18. And finally, I get 1 and 1 and 1 is 3. So we get 3,802. Again, I want to include my units. What kind of things are we talking about here? This is feet. All right, so that goes ahead and takes care of an example of perimeter. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a rectangle. It can be any kind of figure. It can be a triangle. It can be a square. It can be a funky figure, which we'll look at later this semester. The main thing is to find perimeter, you always add all of the sides. All right, that takes care of A.2. So go ahead and do the homework for this section, and then in the next presentation we will look at subtraction.